He thought it was just another night mopping floors, until a room full of executives laughed in his face and dared him to cook for them. They didn't know the recipes he carried were the last gift from the woman he loved, or that each dish was a piece of his heart. But one perfect bite didn't just silence the room, it brought back a memory the CEO had buried for years. And just when it seemed his life was about to change forever, a single text from his daughter shattered everything. Now, he must choose between the biggest break of his life and the one person he can't afford to let down. When love, loss, and second chances collide, which moment would you fight for? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead as Eli Ward guided his mop across the last stretch of marble floor in the Carter Finch lobby. The familiar scent of lemon cleaner filled the air, mixing with the quiet of the nearly empty building. His knees protested as he pushed the mop in long, steady strokes, but he kept working, humming the gentle melody that Sarah used to sing to Maya when she was little. "Sleep tight, my angel," he whispered the words of the lullaby under his breath, remembering how Sarah's voice would soften on those lines. 8 years had passed since she'd left them, but some memories stayed as fresh as yesterday. The lobby's grand clock ticked steadily toward 10. Through the towering glass windows, the city lights twinkled like stars, reminding Eli of the way Maya's eyes lit up when she talked about her upcoming piano recital. His chest tightened with a familiar mix of pride and worry. He paused his mopping, leaning against the handle as he looked around the massive lobby. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, their dim evening light catching on the freshly cleaned floor. During the day, this space bustled with important people in expensive suits, rushing to meetings and barely noticing him as he went about his work. Now, in the quiet of night, it felt almost peaceful. Eli's thoughts drifted to the stack of bills waiting at home. Maya's piano lessons weren't cheap, but they were worth every penny of overtime he could scrape together. She had her mother's talent, and he'd do anything to keep that spark alive in her. "Just gotta keep going," he murmured to himself, a habit he'd developed over the years of working alone at night. One day at a time. His weathered hands gripped the mop handle tighter as he remembered the electricity bill that had arrived yesterday. The numbers seemed to grow every month, and his salary stayed the same. But he wouldn't let Maya see his worry. She had enough on her mind with the recital coming up. The last of the office lights above flickered off, leaving only the security lights casting long shadows across his freshly mopped floors. Eli checked his watch. 9:45. Right on schedule. He had his routine down to the minute, just like everything else in his life. It had to be that way, being both mom and dad to Maya. As he wrung out the mop one final time, he caught his reflection in the polished elevator doors. Gray hair at his temples, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when Sarah was alive. But his mother always said eyes were windows to the soul, and his still held the same gentle determination they always had. "Almost done, Sarah," he said softly to his reflection, another habit he couldn't shake. Sometimes talking to her made the empty moments feel less lonely. "Maya's doing so well. You'd be so proud of her." By 10:15, Eli had his cleaning supplies stored away in the janitor's closet, each item in its proper place. He signed out at the security desk, exchanging a tired smile with Norton, the night guard who'd been working here as long as he had. "Another day done," Norton said, sliding the sign-out sheet across his desk. "Another day done," Eli agreed, signing his name in neat script. "How's your grandson doing?" "Starting t-ball next week. Growing like a weed." Norton's face softened with grandfatherly pride. "How's your girl? Still playing that piano?" "Getting better every day." Eli couldn't help the smile that spread across his face. "Got a big recital coming up. You'll have to tell me how it goes." Norton handed him his parking validation. "Drive safe now." The parking garage was eerily quiet as Eli made his way to his old pickup truck. The blue paint was faded, and there was a rust spot growing above the wheel well, but it ran well enough. He climbed in, the familiar creak of the door a comfort after the long day. Before starting the engine, he connected his phone to the ancient adapter he'd bought at a discount store. Within moments, the sounds of classical piano filled the cab. It was the piece Maya had been practicing, Beethoven's Fur-Elise. She'd recorded herself playing it last week, wanting to listen for mistakes. As he drove through the quiet city streets, the music wrapped around him like a warm blanket. Maya played with such feeling, even if she hit a wrong note here and there, just like her mother used to. The memory of Sarah at their old upright piano, teaching 5-year-old Maya the basics, made his heart ache in a way that was both sweet and painful. Traffic lights cast alternating colors across his dashboard as he made his way home. Red, yellow, green, like the rhythm of his days. Work, sleep, repeat. But it was all worth it for Maya. Everything was for Maya. The drive home took exactly 22 minutes, just like always. Eli pulled into the driveway of their small ranch house, noting that the porch light was still on. Mrs. Rodriguez next door always kept an eye out for Maya when he worked late, but she'd have gone home hours ago. He quietly unlocked the front door, trying not to let it squeak. The house was dark except for a thin line of light coming from under Maya's door. His footsteps were soft on the carpet as he made his way down the hallway. Gently, he pushed open her door. The sight made his breath catch in his throat. Maya was slumped over her electronic keyboard, her dark hair falling across the keys, hands still resting where they'd stopped playing. Her face was peaceful in sleep, looking so much like Sarah that it made his heart skip a beat. Sheet music was scattered across her desk, covered in pencil marks and notes in her careful handwriting. A half-empty glass of water sat dangerously close to the keyboard's edge. She'd obviously been practicing right up until sleep claimed her. The early morning sun hadn't yet risen when Eli stood in his modest kitchen, stirring a pot of oatmeal. Steam rose in gentle swirls as he added a pinch of cinnamon and a drizzle of honey, small touches that made simple food special. The kitchen was cramped but clean, with worn countertops that had seen thousands of meals prepared over the years. He glanced at the clock on the microwave. 6:15 a.m. Time to wake Maya. But first, he divided the oatmeal into 2 bowls, topping each with a handful of fresh berries he'd bought on sale yesterday. The bright red and blue fruits made cheerful spots of color against the creamy oatmeal. Eli walked down the narrow hallway to Maya's room, his footsteps quiet on the old carpet. Her door was decorated with musical notes she'd cut from construction paper, along with a few photographs of her piano recitals. He knocked gently. "Maya, honey, time to get up." A muffled groan came from inside, followed by the rustle of blankets. Eli smiled and opened the door. Maya lay curled up in her bed, her dark hair spread across the pillow like a fan. Sheet music was scattered across her desk, evidence of late-night practicing. "Come on, sleepyhead. Breakfast is ready, and it's getting cold." Maya's eyes blinked open. "Is it oatmeal again?" "With berries and honey," Eli said. "The way Mom used to make it." That got her attention. Maya sat up, her hair tousled from sleep. "Did you put cinnamon in it? Would I forget your favorite part?" In the kitchen, Maya perked up as she spooned up her breakfast. Her eyes were bright with excitement, and she could barely sit still. "Mr. Peterson said something amazing yesterday during my lesson," she burst out. Eli looked up from his own bowl. "Oh? He thinks I should try out for the regional competition." Maya's words tumbled out in a rush. "There's a scholarship prize, Dad. A big one. It could help with music school later." Eli's heart swelled with pride, even as a familiar worry tugged at him. Competition fees weren't cheap, and Maya's piano lessons already stretched their budget thin. But looking at his daughter's hopeful face, he knew they'd find a way. "That's wonderful news, sweetie. Mr. Peterson wouldn't suggest it if he didn't think you were ready." Maya nodded eagerly. "He says my technique has really improved, and—" she hesitated, stirring her oatmeal. "He says Mom would be proud." Eli reached across the table and squeezed her hand. She already was, every single day. After breakfast, they climbed into Eli's old pickup truck. The engine coughed once before rumbling to life, and Maya immediately reached for the radio, finding her favorite classical music station. "You know what would be really cool?" Maya said as they drove. "If you cooked something really fancy sometime, like those chefs on TV." Eli chuckled. "What's wrong with my scrambled eggs?" "Dad, you make them for dinner at least twice a week." "They're famous Ward family scrambled eggs," he protested with mock indignation. Maya rolled her eyes, but she was grinning. Sure, Dad. Famous for being the only thing you cook besides oatmeal and spaghetti. Hey now, I make a mean grilled cheese too. I dare you, Maya said suddenly. I dare you to make something fancy, something with a French name. Eli glanced at her, amused. Since when do you want fancy French food? Since Jessica's dad made coq au vin for their dinner party. She wouldn't stop talking about it for days. Coco, what now? See? You need to expand your culinary horizons, Dad. They pulled up to Maya's school, and she gathered her backpack and sheet music. Before getting out, she leaned over and gave him a quick hug. Love you, Dad. Love you too, honey. Have a good day. Eli watched her join the stream of students heading into the building, her dark ponytail bouncing with each step. Then he checked his watch and felt his stomach tighten. The staff meeting was in 30 minutes. The email had arrived yesterday, marked urgent. All maintenance staff were required to attend a special meeting before regular hours. In his 15 years at Carter, A.P. Finch, this had never happened before. He parked in his usual spot behind the building and changed into his work uniform in the small maintenance locker room. The navy blue coveralls had his name embroidered on the pocket. Eli Ward, Maintenance. He straightened his collar and checked his reflection in the scratched mirror above the sink. The conference room was on the top floor, a place he usually only saw when changing light bulbs or fixing the air conditioning. Now, walking down the polished hallway, he felt conspicuously out of place. Through the glass walls, he could see executives in expensive suits already seated around the long table. As Eli opened the heavy door, several heads turned. He noticed the quick, amused glances between some of the executives, the raised eyebrows, the way some of them shifted their chairs slightly away as he found an empty seat near the back. His work boots seemed unnaturally loud on the hardwood floor. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. His worn coveralls among their tailored suits, his calloused hands against their manicured ones. But Eli held his head high, Sarah's voice echoing in his memory. Your worth isn't in what you do, but in how you do it. Eli shifted uncomfortably in the hard conference room chair, feeling out of place among the polished executives in their tailored suits. The morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, highlighting the contrast between his worn work uniform and their designer clothing. The conference room smelled of expensive coffee and leather, making his thermos of home-brewed coffee seem inadequate. Margaret Finch sat at the head of the oval table, her silver hair perfectly styled, commanding attention without saying a word. The other executives clustered around her like planets orbiting the sun, their laptops and tablets creating a barrier between them and Eli. Blake Turner, one of the younger executives, kept glancing at Eli with poorly concealed amusement. His designer watch caught the light as he leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Now, Margaret said, about the upcoming board gala. We need to discuss catering options after last year's unfortunate incident. Several people around the table grimaced. Eli had helped clean up that mess, literally. The caterer had served undercooked seafood, leading to several board members calling in sick the next day. Blake's eyes lit up with mischief. Why don't we have Ward here handle it? He gestured toward Eli with an exaggerated flourish. I mean, he's always eating lunch in the break room. Surely he must know his way around a kitchen. Laughter rippled around the table. Someone whispered, Is he serious? Another executive poorly disguised her chuckle behind a cough. Eli's face grew warm. He gripped his thermos tighter, the metal cool against his calloused palms. Ma'am, I don't think. But Margaret Finch was studying him with sharp eyes, her head tilted slightly. The room fell silent as she tapped her pen against the polished table surface. Why not? Blake's smirk faltered. Mrs. Finch, I was just... No, really. Margaret straightened in her chair. Why not? Sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected places. She fixed her gaze on Eli. Mr. Ward, how would you feel about preparing dinner for the board this Friday night? Eli's throat went dry. Ma'am, I appreciate the offer, but I'm just the janitor. I've never cooked for... Exactly, Blake interrupted, his voice sharp. He's the janitor. This is a board meeting, not a soup kitchen. Margaret's eyes flashed. "Mr. Turner, that's enough." She turned back to Eli, her expression softening slightly. "Mr. Ward, sometimes the most memorable meals come from home cooks who understand the importance of care and attention to detail. I've seen how meticulously you maintain this building. Why not apply that same dedication to preparing a meal?" Eli's mind raced. He thought of Maya's piano competition, the bills piling up, the extra money this could mean. But the risk of failure in front of the company's most important people made his stomach churn. "I usually only cook for my daughter." "Perfect," Margaret said, closing her leather portfolio with finality. "Family cooking is exactly what we need, something authentic, not pretentious. You'll have access to the executive kitchen and whatever ingredients you require." She stood up, smoothing her blazer. "I expect a menu proposal on my desk by tomorrow morning." The other executives exchanged glances, some bewildered, others clearly skeptical. Blake's face had turned an interesting shade of red as he gathered his things, practically storming out of the conference room. As people filed out, Eli remained seated, still processing what had just happened. A few of the kitchen staff who had been present for the meeting lingered by the door, whispering among themselves and casting uncertain looks in his direction. One of the older kitchen workers shook his head as he passed. "Good luck, man. You're gonna need it." The conference room emptied quickly, leaving Eli alone with the lingering scent of expensive perfume and coffee. He gathered his thermos and made his way to the break room, his footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. The break room was empty this time of morning, the fluorescent lights humming softly overhead. Eli sank into his usual chair, the one with the slight wobble that everyone else avoided. He pulled out his worn lunch bag, the same one Sarah had bought him years ago. The fabric was faded, but the little embroidered chef's hat she'd added was still visible in the corner. His fingers traced the stitching as memories flooded back. Sarah, in their tiny kitchen, teaching him how to make her grandmother's pot roast. The way she'd laugh when he'd mess up, then show him again with infinite patience. Her voice, warm and encouraging. "Cooking is just love made visible, Eli." The break room's institutional walls faded away as he remembered their last Christmas together, how she'd insisted on cooking a full holiday meal despite her weakening condition. The way she'd supervised from a kitchen chair, directing him through each recipe, making sure he'd know how to make Maya's favorite dishes after she was gone. Eli stared at his lunch bag, Sarah's words echoing in his mind. He'd learned to cook out of necessity after losing her, but somewhere along the way, it had become his connection to her memory. Every meal he prepared for Maya was a way of keeping Sarah's love alive in their home. Now, sitting in the sterile break room with its vending machines humming in the corner, Eli felt the weight of the challenge ahead. This wasn't just about impressing executives or proving Blake wrong. It was about honoring everything Sarah had taught him about food and love, and taking care of others. His lunch bag sat on the table, that little embroidered chef's hat seeming to wink at him in the fluorescent light. The break room remained empty and quiet, a pause between the morning's chaos and whatever challenges the afternoon would bring. The kitchen light cast a warm glow as Eli sat at the scratched wooden table, carefully lifting the lid of Sarah's recipe box. The familiar scent of cedar, mixed with traces of vanilla, wafted up, bringing with it a flood of memories. His fingers trembled slightly as they brushed over the worn index cards, each one covered in his wife's neat handwriting. Maya's footsteps padded across the linoleum floor behind him. "Dad, what are you doing with Mom's recipes?" Eli touched one of the cards, remembering how Sarah used to prop it against the sugar container while she cooked. "Just looking through some old favorites, sweetheart." "You're smiling," Maya said, pulling out the chair next to him. The legs scraped against the floor as she scooted closer. Like, really smiling. "What happened?" Eli let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. "Well, something interesting happened at work today. You remember that fancy gala they have every year?" Maya's eyes lit up. "The one where all the rich people dress up and eat tiny food?" "That's the one." Eli shuffled through more recipe cards. "They want me to cook for their board dinner on Friday night." "What?" Maya's mouth dropped open. "But you're the janitor." "Thanks for the reminder," Eli said with a wry grin. "No, I mean, Maya bumped his shoulder with hers. You know what I mean. How did that happen? Eli explained about the meeting, carefully editing out Blake's mockery. Mrs. Finch, the CEO, she just decided to give me a chance. Maya bounced in her seat, her long dark hair swaying with the movement. Dad, this is amazing. You have to do Mom's short ribs. You have to. I don't know, sweetie. That's pretty ambitious for... Mom always said they were magic. Maya reached into the recipe box, her fingers finding the exact card without hesitation. Remember? She said they could make anyone fall in love. Eli's throat tightened. That's how she got me, or so she claimed. Maya held up the recipe card, its corners soft and stained from years of use. Look, it's right here. Sarah's magic short ribs. And see? She pointed to a little heart drawn in the corner. She even put your initials next to it. Eli took the card, running his thumb over the tiny EW, surrounded by a heart. You really think I should make these? Dad. Maya's voice took on that serious tone she sometimes used, the one that made her sound so much like her mother. Those stuck-up people think you're just the guy who mops their floors. Show them who you really are. Eli studied the recipe, memories washing over him. Sarah in their tiny kitchen, the rich aroma of herbs and wine filling the air. The way she'd dance while stirring the sauce, humming under her breath. How she'd always let Maya taste test, even when she was too young to give proper feedback. Okay, he said finally, but you have to help me make a list. We'll need quite a few things from the store. Maya jumped up and grabbed a notepad from the counter. I'm ready. For the next hour, they worked through the recipe together. Maya wrote down each ingredient, while Eli checked their cupboards. The list grew longer. Fresh herbs, quality wine, organic vegetables. When they got to the meat, Eli winced at the thought of the cost. Maybe I should make something simpler, he murmured. No way. Maya underlined short ribs 3 times. Mom always said if you're going to cook for someone, do it right or don't do it at all. She paused, tapping the pen against her chin. I can skip piano lessons this week. That's $30 right there. Absolutely not. Eli pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. We'll figure it out. Besides, they're paying for the ingredients. They continued working, Maya adding little notes in the margins of their list. Don't forget the secret ingredient, she said, writing it down with a flourish. Love? Eli guessed, remembering Sarah's standard answer. No, Dad. Maya rolled her eyes. The star anise. Mom always said it was what made the sauce special. As they finished the list, Eli noticed Maya stifling a yawn. Bedtime, kiddo. You've got school tomorrow. But we're not done planning. Despite her protest, Maya stood up and stretched. The list is finished. The planning can wait until tomorrow. Eli followed her down the hallway to her room, watching as she climbed into bed. Maya snuggled under her covers, her expression thoughtful. Dad? Mom would be really proud of you for doing this. Eli tucked the blanket around her shoulders, his heart full. You think so? I know so. Maya yawned again. Just don't forget the star anise. I won't. Eli kissed her forehead. Sweet dreams, sweetheart. Back in the kitchen, Eli carefully placed Sarah's recipe card on the counter. He smoothed out their shopping list, noting Maya's detailed instructions and little encouraging notes she'd added in the margins. His eyes lingered on the estimated total at the bottom of the page. It would be tight, but seeing Maya's excitement made it worth every penny. He picked up the recipe card again, tracing Sarah's handwriting with his finger. The card held more than just instructions. It held memories of Sunday dinners, family celebrations, and quiet evenings at home. If he was going to do this, he would honor those memories properly. Eli looked at the list one final time before heading to bed. He might be just the janitor to those executives, but in his own kitchen, cooking his wife's recipes, he was something else entirely. If he was going to do this, he'd do it right. The early morning sun painted long shadows across the farmers' market stalls. Eli Ward pulled his worn jacket tighter against the autumn chill as he walked between the neat rows of produce. The market was just coming to life, vendors arranging their goods, while early birds like him searched for the best picks of the day. His footsteps crunched on scattered leaves as he made his way to Mrs. Donnelly's familiar green-striped awning. Her stall always smelled of fresh herbs and seasonal vegetables, bringing back memories of Saturday mornings when Sarah would drag him here at dawn. Mrs. Donnelly's face lit up as she spotted him. "Well, if it isn't Eli Ward." She adjusted her faded denim apron, decorated with hand-embroidered vegetables. "Haven't seen you here in ages." "Morning, Mrs. Donnelly." Eli offered a small smile, his eyes scanning the neatly arranged herbs in terracotta pots. "Looking for something special?" She leaned forward, her silver hair catching the morning light. "Or just browsing?" Eli's fingers brushed against the folded bills in his pocket, money earned from cleaning Mr. Peterson's gutters last weekend. "Need some fresh rosemary, actually, and maybe a few other things." Mrs. Donnelly's eyes sparkled with interest. "Rosemary?" Sarah's favorite. She paused, watching his reaction carefully. "She always said it made everything taste like home." "That's right." Eli's voice grew soft. "She did say that." Mrs. Donnelly busied herself selecting the perfect rosemary sprigs, giving him a moment to compose himself. "What's the occasion?" "Must be something special to bring you here on a Tuesday." Eli hesitated, then explained about the board dinner. Mrs. Donnelly's weathered hands stilled as she listened, her expression growing increasingly indignant at the executive's behavior. "Well?" She straightened up, determination written across her face. "We'll show them what real cooking is about, won't we?" She began gathering items with purpose. "Sarah's braised short ribs need more than just rosemary. You'll want these fresh bay leaves too. I grew them myself." "Mrs. Donnelly, I can't." Eli started to protest, eyeing the growing pile of herbs. "Nonsense." She waved away his concerns. "These are just snippings that would have gone to waste anyway. Sarah was my friend for 20 years, Eli. Let me help." Eli's throat tightened as he watched her wrap the herbs in damp paper towels. She'd been there through everything. Sarah's illness, the funeral, those first terrible months after. Every week since, she'd slip extra produce into Maya's school lunches when he'd stop by. "Now," Mrs. Donnelly said, her voice businesslike, "you'll need carrots too." Sarah always used the rainbow ones for special occasions. She selected several vibrant specimens, their tops still fresh and green. "And these mushrooms just came in. They'll give the sauce that deep flavor she loved." As she gathered items, Mrs. Donnelly shared memories of Sarah's cooking adventures. "Remember that Christmas when she tried making Julia Child's beef bourguignon? Smoke everywhere." She chuckled, but she never gave up until she got it right. Eli nodded, remembering how Sarah had filled 3 notebooks with cooking notes, determined to master every technique. Those notebooks were still in their kitchen drawer, untouched since she'd gone. The morning air grew warmer as other customers began arriving. Mrs. Donnelly finished packaging everything in brown paper bags, adding a few extra items he hadn't asked for but knew he'd need. "How much do I owe you?" Eli reached for his wallet, mentally calculating what he could spare. Mrs. Donnelly named a price so low he knew she was practically giving things away. When he tried to protest, she fixed him with a stern look. "Sarah would have done the same for me, and you know it." Unable to argue with that truth, Eli carefully counted out the bills. Mrs. Donnelly slipped an extra bunch of fresh thyme into his bag when she thought he wasn't looking. "You know," she said softly as she handed him the bags, "Sarah always said you were a better cook than you gave yourself credit for. She told me once that your pot roast was better than her mother's, and that's saying something." Eli's eyes stung as he took the bags. "Thank you, Mrs. Donnelly, for everything. You just show those fancy executives what real cooking is about." She patted his arm. "And bring Maya by soon. I've got some strawberry plants that need a good home." The sun was fully up now as Eli walked back to his truck, the paper bags cradled carefully in his arms. The herb's fresh scent reminded him of countless Sunday dinners, of Sarah dancing around their small kitchen, of Maya helping to stir pots almost as big as she was. At Carter, Finch, Eli slipped in through the service entrance, nodding to the security guard. In the employee locker room, he carefully arranged the fresh ingredients in the small refrigerator he shared with the maintenance staff. Mrs. Donnelly's herbs went in last, wrapped in their damp paper towels to stay fresh until Friday. As he closed the locker door, he caught his reflection in the scratched mirror, a man in a janitor's uniform, planning to cook for some of the wealthiest people in town. But instead of doubt, he felt a quiet determination. These ingredients, selected with care and given with love, carried a piece of Sarah with them. Whatever happened Friday, he would honor that. The industrial kitchen of Carter, HEA, Finch gleamed under fluorescent lights, a maze of stainless steel and professional equipment that made Eli's modest home kitchen look like a toy set. He stood in the doorway, his weathered hands gripping a small notepad. The familiar scent of cleaning products mixed with lingering aromas from lunch service. Tony Marino, the head cook, looked up from where he was aggressively chopping vegetables. His knife paused mid-slice when he spotted Eli. "Can I help you?" The words came out sharp as the blade in his hand. "Morning, Tony." Eli kept his voice steady, polite. "Ms. Finch asked me to check the kitchen setup before Friday, for the board dinner." A few of the kitchen staff stopped what they were doing, watching the exchange. Tony's face reddened slightly. "Right. The janitor's gonna cook for the board." He set down his knife with a clang that made everyone jump. "You know your way around a mop, Ward, but this," he gestured at the professional kitchen, "this is different." Eli nodded, taking a small step into the kitchen. "I understand. I just need to see what equipment I'll be working with." A younger prep cook snickered behind his hand. "Better stick to the cleaning supplies closet, man." Tony crossed his arms, his white chef's coat pulling tight across his chest. "Look, I've been cooking here for 15 years. These people expect excellence. They eat at 5-star restaurants. You really think you can handle this?" Eli pulled out his notepad, his pencil moving across the paper as he counted burners on the massive gas range. "Just here to do the best I can, Tony." His voice remained calm, though his grip on the pencil tightened slightly. "The best you can?" Tony's laugh was harsh. "This isn't some church potluck. One bad meal could cost us all our jobs." More of the kitchen staff had gathered now, some pretending to work while clearly listening in. A few exchanged knowing smirks. Eli continued his inventory, moving toward the walk-in refrigerator. "Mind if I take a look inside?" Tony threw up his hands. "Be my guest. While you're at it, why don't you check out the dish pit? More your speed, isn't it?" The comment drew several chuckles from the staff. Eli paused, his hand on the refrigerator door handle. He thought of Maya, of her determination when practicing a difficult piano piece. The memory straightened his spine. "I appreciate your concern," Eli said quietly, "but Ms. Finch gave me this task, and I intend to complete it." He stepped into the walk-in, the cold air a welcome relief. The organized shelves reminded him of his maintenance work. Everything had its place, its purpose. He made notes about the available storage space, trying to ignore the muffled voices outside. When he emerged, Tony was demonstrating proper knife technique to a junior cook, his movements deliberately exaggerated. "See? This is how professionals do it. Years of training, not just heating up canned soup at home." Eli moved to inspect the ovens, checking their size and temperature ranges. His pencil scratched against the paper, recording details that would help him plan his wife's recipe. The familiar motion of writing calmed him, like the steady back and forth of mopping floors. "You'll need the convection settings," one of the younger cooks called out, his tone mocking. "That's the little fan symbol, in case you're wondering." "Thank you," Eli replied simply, adding the information to his notes. He worked his way methodically through the kitchen, checking equipment he'd need. Mixing bowls, roasting pans, serving platters. Tony watched him like a hawk, following a few steps behind. "Those copper pots?" Tony pointed to a gleaming set hanging above the center island. "They cost more than you make in a month. One scratch and it's coming out of your paycheck." Eli looked up at the pots, their surfaces reflecting the fluorescent lights. "They're beautiful. I'll be careful with them." He finished his inventory by examining the spice rack, its glass jars filled with everything from basic black pepper to exotic saffron threads. The kitchen staff had mostly returned to their duties, though he could feel their sideways glances. Tony stepped in front of him as he made his final notes. "Listen, Ward, this isn't personal, but this kitchen is my responsibility. If this dinner goes south—" "I understand," Eli interrupted gently. "And I respect that. I'm not here to cause trouble, Tony, just trying to do what's asked of me." The head cook studied him for a long moment, jaw clenched. Finally, he stepped aside with a grunt. "Your funeral." Eli tucked his notepad into his pocket and retrieved his cleaning supplies from the hall. The kitchen staff watched in confusion as he began methodically polishing the stainless steel counters. "What are you doing now?" Tony demanded. "My job," Eli replied, working the cloth in smooth circles. "Still the janitor until Friday." He continued polishing, his movements practiced and sure. The familiar task centered him, helped him tune out the whispers and stares. The steel surfaces slowly came to life under his hands, reflecting the bright kitchen lights like mirrors. Each stroke reinforced his determination. He might not have Tony's training or the staff's respect, but he had something else. The memory of countless meals cooked with love, of his wife's patient teachings, of Maya's face lighting up at their dinner table. Those moments were worth more than any copper pot or chef certification. The kitchen gradually returned to its normal rhythm around him, though the tension remained thick as buttercream. Eli kept working, steady and focused, letting his actions speak louder than any defense he could offer. The kitchen clock read 5:30 p.m. when Eli pushed through the heavy double doors, wearing a crisp white apron over his usual work clothes. He'd changed his janitor's uniform for a clean black button-down shirt and pressed khakis, nothing fancy, but respectable. His wife's recipe box, worn smooth at the corners from years of use, was tucked carefully under his arm. The kitchen staff pointedly ignored him as he set up his workstation. Tony, the head cook, watched from across the room with crossed arms and a skeptical frown. Eli took a deep breath and focused on unpacking his ingredients. Fresh herbs from Mrs. Donnelly's market stand, carefully wrapped short ribs he'd splurged on, and root vegetables that reminded him of Sunday dinners at home. "Excuse me," Eli said quietly to a young prep cook. "Could you tell me where I might find a large roasting pan?" The cook glanced nervously at Tony before pointing to a lower cabinet. Eli nodded his thanks and got to work. His hands moved with practiced ease as he seasoned the meat, just as Sarah had shown him countless times in their tiny kitchen. The familiar motions brought back memories of her patient instructions. "Not too much salt, love. Let the meat speak for itself." He hummed softly, the same lullaby he often caught himself singing during his night shifts, while searing the short ribs to a perfect golden brown. The sizzle and aroma of caramelizing meat filled the kitchen. A few of the prep cooks paused their work, trying not to look too interested. "Something smells good," whispered one of the younger kitchen helpers to another. Eli smiled to himself, but kept working. He moved with quiet efficiency, dicing onions and carrots, laying down a bed of aromatics in the roasting pan. The short ribs nestled in like pieces of a puzzle, and he added the wine and stock Sarah had always insisted made all the difference. As the ribs began to braise, filling the kitchen with rich, savory scents, more staff members drifted closer to his station. Even Tony's stern expression had softened slightly. Eli paid them little mind, focusing instead on preparing the sides: golden potato puree with just a touch of cream, glazed baby carrots with honey and dill, fresh green beans blanched to retain their snap. "Where'd you learn to cook like that?" asked Maria, one of the prep cooks who had been watching him plate test portions. Eli looked up from where he was arranging green beans in neat clusters. "My wife," he said simply. "She loved feeding people. Said food was how you showed love without words." The kitchen had grown quieter, the usual clamor of pots and pans replaced by attentive silence. Even Tony had drawn closer, studying Eli's technique with professional interest. At 7:15 p.m., right on schedule, Eli began plating the main course. His hands moved steadily, creating each plate with careful attention. A generous portion of the fork-tender short ribs, sauced just so, accompanied by swoops of potato puree and precisely arranged vegetables. The presentation was rustic but elegant, each element placed with purpose. "Did you really learn all this just from cooking at home?" Tony asked, his earlier hostility replaced by genuine curiosity. Eli nodded, concentrating on wiping a small smudge from the rim of a plate. "Sarah, my wife. She used to say that love makes everything taste better. I guess I just tried to remember everything she taught me." The kitchen doors swung open, and Margaret Finch strode in, her heels clicking against the tile floor. She wore a tailored black dress that spoke of board meetings and corner offices, but something in her expression softened as she took in the scene before her. "Mr. Ward," she said, her voice carrying that CEO authority even as her eyes fixed on the plates. "I thought I should see how our experiment is progressing." Eli gestured to a plated serving. "Would you like to try it, Ms. Finch?" The kitchen staff held their collective breath as Margaret picked up a fork. She cut into the short rib, which fell apart at the slightest pressure. Steam rose from the tender meat as she took a bite. Her composed expression cracked. Something flickered across her face. Recognition, memory, emotion. She set the fork down with a slightly trembling hand. "Excuse me," she said abruptly, her voice thick. Without another word, she turned and walked quickly out of the kitchen, leaving behind a half-eaten plate and a room full of confused onlookers. Eli watched her go, still holding a serving spoon, understanding written across his weathered features. He'd seen that look before, the way food could suddenly transport you back to another time, another kitchen, another life. He turned back to his work, continuing to plate the remaining servings with the same careful attention, humming that quiet lullaby under his breath. The dining room buzzed with appreciative murmurs as the board members finished their meals. Eli stood in the kitchen, methodically cleaning his workspace just as he did during his regular janitorial duties. His hands moved automatically over the counters while his mind wandered to Margaret's abrupt departure earlier. He hoped he hadn't somehow offended her with the food. The kitchen staff moved around him differently now. The earlier snickers had faded into curious glances, and even Tony had grudgingly nodded at him after tasting a bit of sauce that had dripped onto a prep spoon. The double doors swung open, and Margaret Finch strode in. Her usual commanding presence seemed softened somehow, like tissue paper that had been crumpled and smoothed out again. The kitchen fell silent. "Mr. Ward," she said, her voice carrying across the quiet kitchen, "would you join me for a moment?" Eli wiped his hands on his apron and followed her to a quiet corner near the industrial refrigerators. Up close, he could see her eyes were still slightly red. "I owe you an explanation for my behavior earlier," Margaret said, her perfectly manicured hands clasped tightly together. "That meal, those short ribs, they were exactly like something my brother used to make." Eli noticed how she said, "used to." He recognized the past tense that haunted his own stories about Sarah. "He was a chef," Margaret continued, her voice growing softer. "He passed away 5 years ago. Your cooking." She paused, composing herself. "It brought back memories I wasn't prepared for." "I'm sorry for your loss," Eli said quietly, meaning it. "The recipe was my wife's. She passed 8 years ago." Understanding passed between them like a current. Margaret's professional mask slipped back into place, but her eyes remained warmer than before. "Come with me," she said, turning toward the dining room. "There's something I need to do." Eli followed her through the double doors, suddenly conscious of his work clothes among the sea of expensive suits. The board members looked up from their desserts, their faces showing various degrees of satisfaction. "Ladies and gentlemen," Margaret addressed the room, her voice strong and clear, "I want to formally acknowledge the chef responsible for tonight's exceptional meal. Mr. Eli Ward prepared everything you enjoyed this evening." Eli felt his face grow warm as heads turned toward him. He saw Blake, the junior executive who'd made the original joke, shift uncomfortably in his chair. The depth of flavor, the attention to detail, the perfect execution. It wasn't just a meal. It was a reminder of what real cooking can be. Margaret's voice carried genuine emotion, "which is why I'd like to make an announcement." She turned to face Eli directly. "Mr. Ward, I'd like to offer you the position of head chef for our upcoming charity gala." The room fell silent. Eli blinked, certain he'd misheard. "The annual gala is our biggest event of the year," Margaret continued. "Over 300 guests, including our most important clients and partners. Based on what you've demonstrated tonight, I believe you're exactly what we need." Eli's mind raced. The gala was a black tie affair he'd cleaned up after for years, but never imagined attending, let alone cooking for. The scale of it was overwhelming. "Ms. Finch? I'm honored, but—" he started. "You don't need to answer right now," Margaret cut in smoothly. "Take the weekend to think about it. We can discuss details on Monday." The board members were nodding now, several offering their own compliments about the meal. Even Blake joined in, though his praise seemed slightly forced. "Thank you," Eli managed to say. "I'll think about it." He drove home in a daze, his thoughts tumbling over each other like clothes in a dryer. The old pickup's familiar rattles couldn't drown out the echo of Margaret's offer in his head. Head chef. At the gala. It seemed impossible. The porch light was still on when he pulled into his driveway, and Maya was waiting up despite the late hour. She bounded down the front steps as he climbed out of the truck. "Dad, how did it go? Did they like it? Tell me everything." Her words tumbled out in an excited rush. Eli couldn't help but smile. "They liked it so much," he said, wrapping her in a hug, "that Ms. Finch offered me a job as head chef for their big charity gala." Maya pulled back, her eyes wide. "Really, Dad? That's amazing." She hugged him again, tighter this time. Then she went still in his arms, and he felt her shoulders tense slightly. "Wait," she said, her voice smaller now. "When's the gala?" 3 weeks from now, on the 15th, Eli answered, still holding her. Maya stepped back, and Eli's heart sank as he watched her face fall. "But Dad, that's the same night as my piano competition." The joy of the evening deflated like a punctured balloon. Of course, the regional competition she'd been practicing for months to enter. The scholarship opportunity that could help with her music school dreams. His daughter's big moment. They stood there in the warm glow of the porch light, both suddenly quiet, while crickets chirped in the darkness around them. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting warm patterns on the worn wooden table where Eli and Maya sat. The familiar scent of pancakes and maple syrup filled their small kitchen. Eli had made Maya's favorite breakfast. Chocolate chip pancakes shaped like music notes, a tradition he'd started when she first began playing piano. Maya picked at her breakfast, pushing a chocolate chip around her plate with her fork. Her usual Saturday morning cheerfulness was missing, replaced by a worried frown that made her look older than her 12 years. "Dad?" she said, finally looking up from her plate. "I've been thinking about the gala." Eli set down his coffee mug, giving his daughter his full attention. "What about it, sweetie?" "I think." She took a deep breath, squaring her small shoulders. "I think you should do it." "Maya, your competition." "Is just one competition?" she interrupted, trying to sound grown-up. "There will be others. But this could be really big for you, Dad. Like, really big." Eli's heart squeezed in his chest. Here was his 12-year-old daughter trying to be brave for him. He remembered how excited she'd been just yesterday when her piano teacher had mentioned the scholarship opportunity. The way her eyes had lit up, how she'd practically bounced all the way to the car. "You've been practicing for months for this competition," he said gently. "I know how much it means to you." Maya shrugged, but Eli could see the slight tremor in her lower lip. "Yeah, but Mom would want you to take this chance. She always said you were the best cook she knew." Eli reached across the table and covered her small hand with his. Her fingers were getting longer, more graceful, pianist's hands, just like her mother's. "Your mom would want us both to follow our dreams." "But Dad," Maya persisted, her voice getting stronger, "you've been taking care of me forever, always working extra shifts and doing everything for me. Maybe it's time something good happened for you too." Eli had to swallow hard past the lump in his throat. When had his little girl grown so wise? "You know you're the most important thing in my life, right?" Maya rolled her eyes but smiled. Yeah, I know. But seriously, Dad, I want you to do this. I mean, Mrs. Finch is like super important, right? And she picked you special." "She did," Eli admitted, remembering the look on Margaret's face when she'd tasted his cooking. There had been something vulnerable there, something that went beyond just appreciating a good meal. "So, maybe this is like destiny or something?" Maya suggested, waving her fork for emphasis. A bit of syrup flew off and landed on the table. "Oops, sorry." Eli grabbed a napkin, wiping up the syrup with the automatic motion of a longtime parent. "Destiny, huh? Mom always said good things come to good people," Maya said quietly. "And you're the best person I know, Dad." Eli had to look away for a moment, blinking rapidly. When he could trust his voice again, he said, "How about we clean up these dishes?" They worked together in comfortable silence, Maya washing while Eli dried, just like always. But his mind was racing, weighing options, trying to figure out how to be in two places at once. After they finished, Maya went to practice her piano pieces, the familiar notes of her competition piece floating through their small house. Eli sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone. Margaret Finch's business card lay next to it, the elegant black typography seeming to mock his indecision. The music from Maya's room swelled, hitting a particularly difficult passage that she'd been struggling with. Today, her fingers moved smoothly through it, each note clear and confident. Pride and guilt warred in his chest. He picked up his phone, his hand slightly shaking as he dialed the number on the card. It rang twice before Margaret's crisp voice answered. Margaret Finch speaking. Eli's stomach clenched. "Mrs. Finch, this is Eli Ward." "Ah, Eli." Her tone warmed slightly. "I was hoping to hear from you. Have you made a decision about the gala?" Through the wall, Maya hit another perfect run of notes. Eli closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and said, "Yes, ma'am, I'd be honored to take on the role of head chef for the event." "Excellent!" Margaret's enthusiasm was genuine. "I knew you'd make the right choice. We'll need to meet Monday morning to discuss the details." "Would 9 a.m. work for you?" "Yes, that would be fine." His voice sounded steady, even as his stomach twisted into knots. "Perfect. See you then, Eli. And thank you. I know this means a lot to the company, but it means even more to me personally." After they hung up, Eli sat there, phone still in his hand, listening to his daughter play. The morning sun had moved, throwing different patterns across the kitchen table now. From her room, Maya called out, "Dad, come listen. I finally got this part right." "Be right there, sweetie," he called back, his voice only slightly rough. He stood up, squared his shoulders, and headed toward his daughter's room, determined to figure out how to make this work for both of them. They'd faced harder challenges before, after all. Somehow, they'd find a way through this one too. As he walked down the hallway, Maya's music filled the house with hope and determination, even as worry gnawed at his insides. The industrial kitchen gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights as Eli stepped through its doors early Monday morning. His freshly pressed white uniform felt stiff and foreign against his skin, so different from his familiar janitor's clothes. The kitchen staff bustled around, their movements precise and practiced, while Eli stood uncertainly by the entrance. Tony Marino noticed him first, his thick eyebrows furrowing. "Well, look who's here, our janitor turned chef." He wiped his hands on his apron and approached Eli with measured steps. "You may have impressed the boss lady, but in my kitchen you start from the bottom." Eli nodded respectfully. "I understand, chef. Where do you need me?" Tony gestured toward a mountain of onions. "Start with those. I need them all diced. Show me you can handle the basics before you even think about touching the main dishes." The kitchen staff threw curious glances his way as Eli rolled up his sleeves and grabbed a knife. His hands remembered the familiar motions, countless evenings spent cooking with Sarah, her patient instructions guiding his movements. The knife moved steadily through the onions, creating neat, even pieces. Hours passed in a blur of repetitive tasks. When Eli finished the onions, Tony inspected his work with a critical eye, then pointed him toward a stack of potatoes that needed peeling. Then came carrots to julienne, celery to chop, and garlic to mince. His back ached from standing, and his fingers were raw from the constant contact with water and vegetables. "Ward," Tony's sharp voice cut through the kitchen's steady rhythm. "Those Brussels sprouts aren't going to trim themselves." Eli wiped his brow with his sleeve and reached for another crate of vegetables. He could feel Tony watching him, waiting for him to complain or make a mistake. But Eli kept working steadily, maintaining the same careful attention he gave to every task, whether it was mopping floors or chopping vegetables. Around noon, Margaret Finch's distinctive click of heels echoed through the kitchen. The staff straightened unconsciously as she entered, her tailored suit a stark contrast to their food-stained uniforms. "How's our new chef settling in?" she asked, her eyes finding Eli at his workstation. Tony crossed his arms. "He's learning the basics, Ms. Finch, like anyone else would." Margaret approached Eli's station, examining the neat piles of prepared vegetables. "Excellent knife work, Eli." She turned to Tony. "I trust you'll give him the space to develop his menu ideas for the gala?" "That braised short rib was exceptional. I want to see more of that creativity." Tony's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, Ms. Finch, we have standard procedures." "And sometimes standards need to be challenged," Margaret interrupted smoothly. She placed a hand on Eli's shoulder. "I'm giving you creative freedom for the menu, Eli. Show us what you can do." The kitchen fell silent. Eli could feel the weight of everyone's stares. "Thank you, Miss Finch. I won't let you down." "I know you won't." Her smile held a warmth that seemed reserved just for him. "And please, call me Margaret." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Eli, don't let anyone make you doubt yourself. You earned this chance." After she left, Tony assigned Eli to washing dishes for the rest of the afternoon. His hands turned pruny in the hot water, but his mind was already racing with possibilities. He thought about Sarah's recipes, about the dishes that had always brought comfort and joy to their small family. The day stretched long, and by the time Eli got home, his feet were throbbing. Maya was already asleep, her piano book spread across her desk. He kissed her forehead gently, then headed to his own room. Instead of going straight to bed, Eli pulled out a worn notepad and a pencil. He sat at his small desk, the only light coming from his bedside lamp. His hands, still smelling faintly of onions and soap, began to move across the paper. First, he wrote down Sarah's short rib recipe, the one that had started this whole journey. Then came other dishes, her herb-crusted rack of lamb, the roasted root vegetables with honey and thyme, the silky mushroom soup that had won hearts at every family gathering. He sketched rough plating ideas in the margins, remembering how Sarah used to say that people eat with their eyes first. More ideas flowed. A starter of seared scallops with citrus butter, drawing from the seafood dishes his mother used to make. A dessert of warm apple tart with vanilla bean ice cream, inspired by the afternoons he and Maya spent baking together. The clock ticked past midnight as Eli continued filling pages with notes and ideas. His eyelids grew heavy, but his heart felt light. For the first time since accepting this challenge, he felt not just determination, but genuine excitement. These weren't just recipes, they were stories, memories, pieces of his life that he could share through food. He looked at the pages spread before him, covered in his messy handwriting and rough drawings. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more skeptical looks from Tony, more pressure to prove himself. But tonight, in the quiet of his room, Eli allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could turn these scribbled dreams into reality. The rhythm of Eli's days shifted like a well-orchestrated dance between two worlds. By day, the clatter of pots and pans filled his ears as he worked in the company kitchen. By night, the gentle notes of Maya's piano practice floated through their modest apartment. Monday morning found him chopping vegetables, his knife skills improving with each precise cut. Tony had assigned him to basic prep work, clearly hoping to bore him into quitting, but Eli approached each task with the same care he'd given to polishing floors and cleaning windows. "Watch those carrots," Tony barked, passing by. "They need to be uniform." Eli nodded, adjusting his technique. His hands were tired from hours of detailed work, but he remembered his wife's patient lessons in their tiny kitchen years ago. "Take your time," she'd always said. "Love shows in the details." After his shift, he rushed home to find Maya already at the piano, her fingers dancing across the keys. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She'd been practicing harder than ever. "How about a break?" Eli suggested, setting down his bag. "I brought ingredients for Mom's mac and cheese." Maya's face lit up. "The one with the 3 kinds of cheese?" "That's the one." He rolled up his sleeves, glad to cook something familiar after a day of fancy French techniques. As they ate dinner, Maya played through her competition piece, stopping occasionally to make notes in her sheet music. Eli listened while washing dishes, his heart swelling with pride. Tuesday and Wednesday blurred together. Eli learned the proper way to make stock, how to coordinate multiple dishes, timing, and the importance of mise en place. His feet ached from standing all day, but watching Maya master difficult passages in her music gave him renewed energy. "Dad, listen to this part," she'd call out, and he'd pause his cooking to hear her progress. Thursday evening, he dozed off briefly while Maya practiced scales. She gently shook him awake. "Maybe you should rest tonight instead of cooking." Eli straightened up in his chair. No, I'm fine. Let's hear that middle section again." Friday brought new challenges in the kitchen. Margaret had requested he develop 2 original dishes for the gala menu. During his lunch break, he sketched recipe ideas in a notebook, thinking of ways to elevate his wife's home cooking into something elegant. The kitchen staff began to warm to him slightly. Maria, one of the line cooks, showed him a faster way to supreme citrus. Jorge, the dishwasher, shared his grandmother's secret for perfect rice. That evening, Maya helped him test recipes, her honest feedback helping him refine each dish. "More salt," she'd say. Or "the sauce is too thick." Just like her mother, direct but kind. Saturday morning, Eli arrived early to practice his knife skills before the kitchen got busy. His hands moved more confidently now, though still not as fast as the professionals around him. "Your brunoise is getting better," Tony commented gruffly, passing by. It wasn't exactly praise, but Eli would take it. That afternoon, he sat in on Maya's piano lesson, his chef's notebook open on his lap as he jotted down ideas between her songs. Her teacher beamed as Maya played through a particularly challenging passage. "She's really ready for this competition," the teacher said. Eli's chest tightened at the reminder of his impossible choice. Sunday brought a moment of peace. While Maya practiced, Eli prepared a test run of one of his gala dishes, a refined version of his wife's braised short ribs with root vegetables. The familiar scents filled their apartment, mingling with the sound of Mozart. Each evening, no matter how exhausted he felt, Eli made sure to sit with Maya during her practice. Sometimes he'd doze in his chair, other times he'd work on menu plans, but he was always there, present for every triumphant moment when she mastered a difficult section. The following week continued its relentless pace. Eli's hands grew calloused in new places from knife work, while his ears grew more attuned to the subtle changes in Maya's playing. Both father and daughter were pushing themselves harder than ever before. Wednesday evening, Maya worked through her competition piece for what felt like the 100th time. Eli stood in their small kitchen, testing a sauce reduction while listening to the familiar melody. That's when Margaret Finch appeared in their doorway, silent and unannounced. She stood perfectly still, her usual corporate polish softened by something in her expression as she listened to Maya play. Eli noticed her first, nearly dropping his spoon in surprise. But he didn't interrupt Maya's practice. This passage was crucial, and she needed to focus. So they both stood there, the CEO and the janitor turned chef, letting the music fill the simple apartment. Margaret's heels clicked against the polished floor of the empty break room as she made her way to the coffee machine. The morning sun cast long shadows through the windows, painting golden stripes across the walls. She paused when she noticed Eli sitting alone at a corner table, his weathered hands wrapped around a steaming mug. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, her usual commanding tone softened by the early hour. Eli looked up, surprised. "Of course not, Miss Finch." "Margaret," she corrected, settling into the chair across from him. "I think we're past formalities after that board dinner." A comfortable silence settled between them as Margaret stirred cream into her coffee. The spoon clinked quietly against the ceramic. "My daughter's birthday is next week," she said suddenly, her voice carrying a weight Eli hadn't heard before. "Rachel, she's turning 28. Margaret stared into her coffee. "I got the invitation to her party yesterday. Express mail from Seattle." "That's quite a distance," Eli said gently. Margaret's perfectly manicured fingers tightened around her mug. "Yes, well, That was rather the point when she moved there. To get as far from me as possible. She gave a small, bitter laugh. Can't say I blame her. I missed so many birthdays, school plays, parent-teacher conferences. Always another meeting, another deal to close. Eli nodded, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes life throws us curves we don't expect. She's a photographer now, successful too, from what I hear, through mutual friends. Margaret's voice caught slightly. I haven't seen her work in person. She only sends the formal holiday card photo. That must be hard, Eli said softly. Margaret looked up, her usual mask of authority cracking just enough to show the pain underneath. The worst part is, I didn't even notice it happening. One day I looked up from my desk and my little girl was gone, replaced by a stranger who barely answers my calls. Eli was quiet for a moment, then reached for his wallet. He pulled out a worn photograph and placed it carefully on the table. A woman with bright eyes and Maya's smile beamed up at them. Sarah, he said simply. 8 years ago this spring. Margaret's expression softened as she looked at the photo. She's beautiful. Cancer? Eli continued, his voice steady but tender. It was quick, maybe a blessing in that way. But explaining it to Maya, he shook his head. How do you tell a 4-year-old that Mommy isn't coming home? Margaret reached across the table, her hand resting briefly on his arm. I'm so sorry, Eli. The hardest part was the little things, he said. The way Maya would save half her cookie at snack time, because that's what she and her mom always did. Or how she'd ask me to sing her bedtime songs, but I never knew the right words. You figured it out, though, Margaret observed. Maya, she's remarkable. Eli smiled, pride warming his features. She is. But some days I still feel like I'm stumbling in the dark. Sarah was the one who knew how to handle everything. School projects, friend drama, proper hair braiding techniques. He chuckled softly. I'm still terrible at braids. Margaret's laugh joined his, genuine and unguarded. I never mastered those either. Rachel used to beg me to learn, but conference calls were easier to navigate than French braids. Sarah always said perfect braids were overrated anyway, Eli said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. It's the love that counts. Margaret was quiet for a moment, studying the photo. You know, my brother James was a chef, she said softly. That's why you're cooking that night. It brought everything back. He had this way of making simple food taste like home. What happened to him? Eli asked gently. Car accident. 10 years ago. Margaret's voice wavered slightly. He was always telling me to slow down, enjoy life more. The sauce needs time to simmer, Maggie, he'd say. Not just about cooking either. She smiled sadly. I should have listened. Eli nodded, understanding flowing between them. Sometimes the best advice comes from those we lose. Sarah taught you to cook? Margaret asked. Every recipe I know, Eli confirmed. She'd say cooking is just love made visible. I didn't really understand what she meant until after. He paused, collecting himself. Now, when I cook her recipes, it's like she's still here, guiding my hands. Margaret's eyes met his, recognition of shared grief passing between them. That's how I felt, eating your food at the board dinner. It was like James was there, telling me to slow down again. The morning sun had climbed higher, its rays now directly illuminating their corner of the break room. In the warm light, Margaret's carefully maintained professional facade had softened, and Eli's usual reserved demeanor had opened like a flower to the sun. Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted in the space between them. It wasn't just shared grief anymore, but understanding, recognition, a spark of connection neither had expected to find over coffee on an ordinary morning. Margaret glanced at her watch, reluctantly breaking the moment. I should get to my meeting. She stood, smoothing her skirt, but hesitated. Thank you, Eli, for sharing Sarah with me. Eli carefully tucked the photo back into his wallet. Thank you for telling me about Rachel and James. As Margaret turned to leave, she paused, looking back at him. In that moment, they weren't CEO and janitor, weren't their titles or positions. They were just two people who had found an unexpected moment of genuine connection in their shared experiences of loss and love. A look passed between them, warm, understanding, and touched with something neither was quite ready to name. Then Margaret smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes, and Eli found himself smiling back, the morning sunlight warming them both. The afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen's high windows, casting long shadows across the stainless steel counters. Steam rose from various pots and pans as the kitchen staff prepared for the evening service. Eli was organizing his prep station when he caught a whiff of something starting to burn. He glanced up to see Jimmy, one of the younger line cooks, frantically stirring a cream sauce that was beginning to separate. Sweat beaded on Jimmy's forehead as he whispered urgent prayers under his breath. "Need a hand?" Eli asked quietly, moving closer. Jimmy's shoulders tensed. "I'm fine," he muttered, but his trembling hands betrayed his panic. The sauce bubbled ominously, and Eli could see it was moments away from disaster. He remembered Maya's first attempts at making pancakes, that same look of determination mixed with fear. "Mind if I show you something my wife taught me?" Eli kept his voice gentle, non-threatening. "It might help." Jimmy hesitated, then gave a short nod. Tony watched from across the kitchen, his arms crossed and expression unreadable. "First, let's get this off the heat," Eli said, helping Jimmy move the pan. "Now, grab that cold cream there. We'll add it slowly while whisking, kind of like making music. You need the right rhythm." Jimmy's eyebrows rose at the unusual comparison, but he followed Eli's lead. Together, they worked to rescue the sauce, Eli guiding Jimmy's movements with patient instructions. "My wife was always telling me cooking is more art than science," Eli continued, demonstrating the proper whisking technique. "See how the sauce is coming back together? That's because you're giving it time to breathe between additions." The sauce gradually smoothed out, becoming silky and aromatic. Relief washed over Jimmy's face as he realized the disaster had been averted. "Man, I thought I was done for," Jimmy admitted, wiping his brow. "Tony would have had my head if I'd ruined another sauce." "We all make mistakes," Eli said, patting Jimmy's shoulder. "It's how we learn." From his spot near the walk-in cooler, Tony cleared his throat. The kitchen went quiet as he approached, examining the rescued sauce with a critical eye. He dipped a clean spoon in, tasted it, and nodded slowly. "Not bad," Tony admitted, his gruff voice carrying across the now silent kitchen. "Better than before, actually. What did you do differently?" Jimmy explained the technique Eli had shown him, and Tony listened with unexpected attention. When Jimmy finished, Tony turned to Eli. "Where'd you learn that trick?" "My wife," Eli answered honestly. "She worked in restaurants through college. Said she learned it from an old Italian chef." Tony's expression softened slightly. "Smart woman." "The smartest," Eli agreed, a familiar ache in his chest. The moment was broken by Sarah, another line cook, calling out, "Hey Eli, while you're sharing secrets, want to tell me how you got those short ribs so tender last week?" The kitchen's atmosphere shifted as other staff members gathered around, their earlier skepticism replaced by genuine curiosity. Eli found himself surrounded by questions about techniques, timing, and temperatures. "It's all about patience," he explained, demonstrating how he seared the meat. "My wife used to say, you can't rush love or good cooking." Laughter rippled through the group. Even Tony cracked a smile. "Speaking of time," Sarah said, "anyone else notice how much better the staff meals have been since Eli started helping?" "Yeah, beats the usual slop," Miguel, the dishwasher, called out from his station. "Watch it," Tony growled, but there was no real heat in his words, though I suppose having an extra set of experienced hands hasn't hurt. The afternoon continued with a new energy in the kitchen. Staff members who had previously ignored Eli now called out greetings as they passed. During the dinner rush, they worked together smoothly, with Eli stepping in to help wherever needed. As the evening wound down, Eli found himself chopping vegetables alongside Tony for the next day's prep. They worked in comfortable silence until Tony spoke. "You know," he said, not looking up from his cutting board, "I thought Margaret was crazy, bringing in a janitor to cook, figured it was some kind of joke." Eli kept chopping, letting Tony finish his thought. "But you've got good instincts, and you work clean. That matters in a kitchen." "Thank you," Eli said simply. "Don't let it go to your head," Tony warned, but there was a hint of warmth in his voice. "We've still got that gala to get through." The rest of the staff had slowly filtered out, leaving just the two of them in the kitchen. Eli finished his prep work, cleaned his station, and hung up his apron. As he gathered his things to leave, he paused to look around the kitchen. The gleaming pots and pans hung in neat rows. The counters shone under the dimmed lights. The familiar sense of herbs and spices lingered in the air. For the first time since starting this unexpected journey, Eli felt truly at home here. It wasn't just about cooking anymore. It was about being part of something bigger, something his wife would have been proud of. The morning sun cast long shadows through the kitchen windows as Eli meticulously arranged his mise en place. Every ingredient had its place, each herb carefully chopped, each spice measured twice. Tomorrow was the gala, and today was his final chance to perfect everything. His hands moved with practiced grace as he checked his prep list for the third time. 8 courses for 300 guests. The numbers still made his stomach flutter with nervous energy. The kitchen buzzed around him, other staff members going about their own preparations, but Eli remained focused on his tasks. "Looking good, Ward," Tony called out as he passed by, nodding at Eli's perfectly organized station. The head cook's initial coldness had thawed over the past weeks, replaced by a grudging respect. Eli smiled briefly before returning to his work. He picked up a bunch of fresh thyme, letting its fragrance remind him of weekend mornings cooking with his wife. She'd always said the secret to feeding a crowd was treating each plate like it was going to your own family. The morning stretched into afternoon as Eli worked through his checklist. He tested sauces, adjusted seasonings, and coordinated with the pastry team about timing. Every so often his mind wandered to Maya, imagining her at home with Miss Chen, her piano teacher, preparing for tomorrow's competition. During his afternoon break, Eli called home. The familiar sound of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filtered through the phone, along with Maya's occasional frustrated sighs. "How's it going, sweetheart?" he asked when Maya came to the phone. "I keep messing up the middle section." Maya's voice carried a mix of determination and worry. "Miss Chen says I'm rushing it. Remember what Mom used to say about music?" Eli leaned against the break room wall, closing his eyes. "It needs room to breathe." "Like your cooking," Maya said softly. There was a pause before she added, "I wish you could be there tomorrow." Eli's chest tightened. "I know, honey. I'll be thinking of you the whole time. You're going to be amazing." "Thanks, Dad." Another pause. "How's the prep going?" "Good. Got all my stations organized. Just need to finish the sauce preparations and check the protein portions." He tried to keep his voice upbeat. "Your mom's recipes are going to knock their socks off." Maya giggled. "Just don't forget her secret ingredient." "Love," they said in unison, sharing a moment of bittersweet remembrance. After hanging up, Eli returned to the kitchen with renewed focus. He'd promised Margaret a memorable gala dinner, and he intended to deliver. The afternoon passed in a blur of activity, reducing stocks, preparing garnishes, coordinating with the service staff about timing and presentation. By early evening, most of the prep work was complete. Eli stood back, surveying his station with critical eyes. Everything was labeled, dated, and stored properly. Tomorrow's timeline was posted clearly, with every step accounted for. Margaret stopped by as the kitchen staff was cleaning up. "How are we looking, Eli?" "On schedule," he replied, wiping his hands on his apron. "The sauces are ready, proteins are portioned, and vegetables are prepped. We'll start final cooking at noon tomorrow." She nodded approvingly, then hesitated. "I heard about Maya's competition tomorrow. I'm sorry about the timing." Eli managed a small smile. "She understands. It's part of being a grown-up, right? Sometimes we have to make hard choices." Margaret touched his arm briefly. "You're doing a wonderful job here, Eli, both as a chef and as a father." After she left, Eli finished his closing duties, double-checking everything one last time. The kitchen was quiet now, most of the staff gone home. Only the soft hum of the refrigerators broke the silence. He drove home slowly, streetlights casting intermittent shadows across the dashboard. The classical music station played softly, another nocturne, as if the universe was trying to remind him of what he was missing tomorrow. Maya was already in bed when he arrived home, but he could see light under her door. He knocked softly. "Come in," she called. She was sitting cross-legged on her bed, sheet music spread around her like fallen leaves. Her fingers moved silently through the air, practicing the difficult passages. "I'll be cheering you on in spirit tomorrow," Eli said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Every minute." Maya nodded, not meeting his eyes. "I know, Dad. It's okay." But it wasn't okay, and they both knew it. Eli helped her gather up the sheet music, straightening the pages with careful hands. "Your mom would be so proud of you," he said quietly. "How hard you've worked, how brave you are." Maya finally looked up at him, her eyes shining. "She'd be proud of you too, Dad, using her recipes to make something special." Later, lying in his own bed, Eli stared at the ceiling. Sleep eluded him as his mind cycled through tomorrow's timeline, again and again. 300 guests, 8 courses, all while his daughter sat at a piano across town, playing her heart out without him there to watch. The moonlight painted silver shapes on his wall as he wondered if he was making the wrong choice. The gala could make his reputation, open doors he'd never dreamed possible. But Maya's competition was a once-in-a-lifetime moment, a chance for her to shine, to make her own dreams come true. He rolled onto his side, watching the digital clock's red numbers tick slowly forward, each minute bringing him closer to tomorrow's impossible choice. The grand ballroom of Carter, FIFA, Finch Enterprises, sparkled like a jewel box come to life. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across polished marble floors, while delicate arrangements of white roses and silver ribbons adorned each perfectly set table. The air hummed with anticipation and the gentle murmur of arriving guests in evening wear. In the kitchen, Eli moved with quiet purpose between the stainless steel prep stations. His chef's whites were crisp and clean, though his forehead glistened with a fine sheen of sweat. He bent over a plate of seared scallops, adjusting a single microgreen with tweezers until it sat just so. "More sauce on table 12's appetizers," he called out, his voice firm but kind. The kitchen staff responded with practiced efficiency, no longer showing any trace of their earlier resistance to his leadership. Even Tony gave him a respectful nod as he passed by with a tray of perfectly seared foie gras. Eli paused at each station, tasting everything before it left the kitchen. A spoonful of butternut squash soup, velvety smooth, with just the right hint of nutmeg. A bite of the braised short rib, tender enough to cut with a spoon, the sauce rich and glossy. Each dish carried a piece of his heart, recipes learned at his wife's side or created in quiet moments of inspiration. Through the kitchen's swinging doors, he caught glimpses of Margaret working the room. She wore an elegant black evening gown, her silver hair swept up in a classic style. Every so often, she'd glance toward the kitchen, offering him an encouraging smile that made his chest tighten in an unfamiliar way. "First course is ready to go," called out one of the line cooks. Eli nodded, doing one final check of the plating. "Service," he announced, and the waitstaff moved forward in synchronized precision. As each course left the kitchen, Eli felt a curious mix of pride and nervousness. He watched through the service window as the soup was placed before the company's biggest investors. A woman in diamonds took a spoonful and closed her eyes in obvious pleasure. An elderly gentleman at the next table asked for the chef's name. Margaret circulated among the tables, pausing here and there to chat with guests. Her face lit up with genuine pleasure as people praised the food. Once, she caught Eli watching and gave him a subtle thumbs up that made him chuckle despite his nerves. Between courses, Eli's thoughts drifted to Maya. He checked his phone quickly. No messages yet about how her performance had gone. His heart ached at missing it, but he pushed the feeling aside. There was work to be done. The main course was his masterpiece, his wife's braised short ribs, elevated with a red wine reduction and served alongside roasted root vegetables and pureed parsnips. As the plates went out, the kitchen fell into an expectant hush. "Chef," Tony called out, using the title for the first time. "You should see this." Eli moved to the service window. The dining room had gone quiet except for the soft clink of silverware and murmurs of appreciation. He watched as Margaret took her first bite, saw her eyes widen slightly, saw her reach for her napkin to dab at unexpected tears. An elderly board member at the main table raised his glass in the direction of the kitchen. Others followed suit, and soon the whole room was turning to acknowledge the source of their meal. Pride swelled in Eli's chest, warm and full like sunshine. He thought of his wife, of all those hours cooking together in their small kitchen, of her patient teachings and loving encouragement. He thought of Maya, practicing her piano with that same dedicated focus. In that moment, he felt connected to them, both through the simple act of feeding people well. The dessert course went out, individual chocolate soufflé with vanilla bean crème anglaise. Eli had tested this recipe dozens of times at home until he could make it in his sleep. Each one rose perfectly, light as air but rich with deep chocolate flavor. As the last plates were cleared, Margaret stepped to the center of the room and gently tapped her glass for attention. The room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying clearly, "I hope you'll join me in showing our appreciation for tonight's extraordinary meal." The applause started slowly, then built to a crescendo. People rose to their feet, crystal glasses glinting in the chandelier light as they raised them in toast. Through the kitchen window, Eli could see genuine smiles, hear calls of "bravo" and "magnificent." His kitchen staff gathered around him, patting his back and joining in the applause. Tony offered his hand with a genuine smile. "You did it, Chef. You really did it." Eli beamed, his chest so full it felt like it might burst. In that moment, standing in a kitchen that now felt like home, surrounded by a team that had become something like family, he knew he had found something he thought he'd lost, the certainty that he could still make magic happen. The standing ovation continued, and Margaret gestured for him to come out and take a bow. As he pushed through the swinging doors, the warmth of the applause washed over him like a wave. He thought of his wife, of Maya, of all the twists and turns that had led him here. Pride swelled in his heart, pure and sweet as the perfect soufflé rising in its dish. The applause rippled through the ballroom like waves on a peaceful shore. Eli stood near the kitchen doors, his chest swelling with a pride he hadn't felt in years. Guests dabbed their lips with fine linen napkins, their plates nearly cleaned of his wife's beloved recipes, dishes that had once filled their modest home with love and warmth, now bringing joy to some of the city's most influential people. Margaret caught his eye from across the room, raising her champagne glass in a subtle toast. The crystals sparkled under the chandeliers, matching the shine in her eyes. For a moment, everything felt perfect. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket. Eli pulled it out, expecting a congratulatory text from Mrs. Donnelly, who'd supplied the fresh herbs for tonight's feast. Instead, Maya's name flashed on the screen. His heart skipped a beat as he opened the message. "I couldn't do it, Dad. I froze. I needed you." The words hit him like a physical blow. The elegant ballroom, with its soft music and clinking glasses, suddenly felt suffocating. The noise faded away, replaced by a hollow ringing in his ears. His hands trembled as he read the message again, each word cutting deeper than the last. He pictured Maya alone at the competition venue, her small fingers hovering over the piano keys, searching the audience for his familiar face, finding only empty seats where her father should have been. The image made his stomach turn. The kitchen staff bustled around him, clearing plates and preparing dessert, but Eli stood frozen. Tony approached with a question about the chocolate soufflés, but stopped short when he saw Eli's face. "Hey, you okay?" Tony asked, his usual gruffness softened with concern. Eli tried to speak, but his throat felt too tight. He showed Tony the phone screen. "Oh, man," Tony whispered, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Your kid's competition. It was tonight." Eli nodded, the simple movement feeling like it took all his strength. The weight of his choice pressed down on him like a physical thing. He'd chosen this gleaming kitchen over his daughter's moment of need. The taste of success turned bitter in his mouth. Through the kitchen windows, he could see Margaret working the room, her elegant figure moving from table to table. She paused to chat with board members, her smile confident and assured. This night meant everything to her, to the company, and he'd helped make it a success. But at what cost? The phone buzzed again. Another message from Maya. "Can you come home?" The words blurred as tears threatened to form. Eli blinked them back, years of practice keeping his emotions in check, but inside, his heart was breaking. He looked around the kitchen he'd come to love over the past weeks. The gleaming pots and pans, the orderly prep stations, the staff who'd finally accepted him as one of their own. The dream he never knew he had, suddenly realized. And now, Tony touched his arm. "Go," he said simply. "We've got this covered. The hard part's done. But the dessert service," Eli protested weakly. "I know the recipe," Tony assured him. "Been watching you like a hawk all week, haven't I? Besides, soufflés are my specialty. Or did you think I got this job just for my charming personality?" A ghost of a smile crossed Eli's face, gratitude warming his chest. He untied his apron with trembling fingers, folding it carefully out of habit. "Tell Margaret," he started, then faltered. What could he say? That he was sorry for abandoning her biggest event of the year? That he'd failed her trust in him? "I'll handle it," Tony promised. "Family comes first. She'll understand that better than most." Eli nodded, his throat tight. He slipped through the kitchen, past the bustling staff and towers of plates, waiting to be filled with delicate desserts. The side corridor felt cool and quiet after the kitchen's heat and noise. He pulled out his phone again, Maya's messages glowing on the screen. 8 years of being both mother and father, of trying to fill the gap his wife's death had left in their lives. 8 years of promising Maya she would always come first, and tonight, when she'd needed him most, he'd broken that promise. The weight of his keys felt heavy in his hand as he approached the side door. Through it, he could hear the muffled sounds of the gala. Laughter, music, the gentle clink of glasses. Success within his grasp, slipping away like water. Eli pushed open the heavy door, and the cold night air rushed in to meet him. It cleared his head, sharpening his thoughts to a single point. His daughter needed him. Everything else, the gala, the praise, the potential future in this kitchen, all of it faded away against that simple truth. The side door closed behind him with a soft click. The glow of street lamps cast long shadows across Eli's weathered pickup truck as he drove through the empty streets. His chef's coat, pristine white at the start of the evening, now bore the marks of his triumph, a splash of reduction sauce here, a dusting of flour there. But the victory felt hollow, like ashes in his mouth. The text message from Maya played over and over in his mind. "I couldn't do it, Dad. I froze. I needed you." Each word was a knife twisting in his heart. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turning white. A red light stopped him at an intersection. In the silence of his idle truck, memories of the evening's success seemed to mock him. The appreciative murmurs of the guests, Margaret's proud smile, even the grudging respect in Tony's eyes, all of it meant nothing now. He thought of Maya, alone on that stage, facing her fears without him there to give her a reassuring nod. The light turned green, but Eli sat there for a moment longer, lost in thought. A car honked behind him, jolting him back to reality. He pressed the gas pedal, his truck lurching forward into the night. Their small house came into view, a single lamp glowing in the living room window. Eli's throat tightened at the sight. He'd left all the fancy food and elaborate presentations behind, but the weight of his choice sat heavy on his shoulders. He parked the truck and walked slowly to the front door, his footsteps crunching on the gravel driveway. The sound seemed too loud in the quiet neighborhood. His key scraped in the lock, and he pushed the door open gently. The living room lamp cast a soft, warm glow over the scene that broke his heart. Maya lay curled up on their old plaid couch, still wearing her performance dress, the one they'd saved up to buy specially for tonight. Her face was buried in the throw pillow his wife had embroidered years ago, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Sheet music lay scattered across the coffee table, some pages having fluttered to the floor. Her competition piece, Mozart's Sonata in C major, the one she'd practiced for months until her fingers ached. The one she'd played for him countless times in their living room, getting better and better with each attempt. "Maya?" Eli's voice came out barely above a whisper. She lifted her head slowly. Her face was streaked with tears, mascara creating dark rivers down her cheeks. Her hair, which she'd carefully styled for the performance, had come partly undone, stray strands sticking to her damp face. "I'm sorry, Dad," she choked out, fresh tears welling up in her eyes. "I really tried. I got up there and looked out at all those people, and I kept thinking about how Mom used to sit in the front row at my recitals. And then I couldn't find you in the audience because you weren't there, and my hands started shaking, and Her words tumbled out in a rush before dissolving into more tears. Eli crossed the room in 3 quick strides, his chef's coat rustling as he moved. He sat down beside her on the couch, and Maya immediately collapsed against him, burying her face in his shoulder. He could feel her tears soaking through the fabric. "I let everyone down," she mumbled into his coat. "Ms. Harrison, the scholarship committee?" "You." "No, sweetheart." Eli's voice cracked as he stroked her hair. "You didn't let anyone down. I'm the one who let you down." Maya pulled back slightly, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "But your big night at the gala wasn't as important as being there for you." Eli's chest ached with regret. "I got caught up in trying to prove something to everyone else, and I forgot what really matters." He looked around their modest living room, at the family photos on the walls, the old piano in the corner where Maya practiced every day, the throw blanket his wife had crocheted still draped over the armchair. Success meant nothing if it came at the cost of what they'd built together. Maya's breathing slowly steadied as she leaned against him. The familiar scent of kitchen spices clung to his coat, mixing with the lingering traces of her strawberry shampoo. It reminded him of countless evenings cooking dinner while she practiced piano, their own kind of harmony. "Remember what Mom used to say about mistakes?" Eli asked softly. A small smile tugged at Maya's lips. "They're just detours on the road to getting it right," she quoted. "Exactly." Eli pulled her closer. "And you know what? I made a big mistake tonight. But I'm going to get it right from now on." Maya sniffled, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Promise?" The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Eli thought about Margaret's offer, about the praise and recognition he'd received tonight. Then he looked at his daughter's face, so much like her mother's, and knew there was only one answer. He hugged her tightly, whispering, "I'm sorry." The morning sun crept through Maya's bedroom window, casting a soft glow on her music sheets scattered across the floor. Eli sat at the kitchen table, still in yesterday's clothes, his hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. He hadn't slept much, spending most of the night holding Maya while she cried herself to sleep. A gentle knock at the door startled him from his thoughts. Through the window, he could see Margaret Finch standing on his porch, holding 2 paper coffee cups from the fancy cafe downtown. She looked different from her usual polished self. More casual in jeans and a simple sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Eli opened the door, trying to mask his surprise. "Mrs. Finch?" "Margaret, please." She held out one of the cups. "I thought you might need this. May I come in?" He hesitated for a moment before stepping aside. Their small house felt even smaller with Margaret's presence. Family photos lined the walls, mostly of Maya and Eli, with a few precious ones of Sarah, his late wife, mixed in. The living room still showed signs of last night. Maya's crumpled competition dress draped over a chair, sheet music scattered on the coffee table. "I'm sorry about leaving so suddenly last night," Eli said, taking a sip of the fresh coffee. It was rich and smooth, nothing like the instant coffee he usually drank. "Don't apologize." Margaret's voice was soft as she took in the modest but tidy home. "I saw Maya's text on your phone when you left it in the kitchen. I understand more than you might think." A floorboard creaked, and they both turned to see Maya standing in the hallway. Her eyes were still red and puffy, her long dark hair tangled from a restless night. She wore her favorite oversized sweater, the one that used to belong to her mother. "Good morning, sweetheart," Eli said gently. Maya's eyes darted between her father and Margaret, uncertainty clear on her face. "Hi," she mumbled, wrapping her arms around herself. Margaret set her coffee down and smiled warmly. "You must be Maya. I've heard so much about your piano playing. Would you mind if we sat and talked for a bit?" Maya looked to her father, who nodded encouragingly. They settled in the living room. Maya curled up next to Eli on the worn couch, Margaret taking the armchair where Sarah used to read bedtime stories. "Your father's cooking reminded me of someone very special last night," Margaret began, her usual confident tone softened by emotion. "My brother James. He was a chef too, actually. He passed away several years ago." Maya's posture relaxed slightly, her natural curiosity peeking through her sadness. "Was he good like Dad?" A smile touched Margaret's lips. "Very good. But I didn't appreciate it enough when he was here. I was always too busy with work, missing his restaurant openings, canceling family dinners." She paused, taking a steadying breath. "Just like I was too busy for my daughter, Rachel." Eli noticed how Margaret's hands tightened around her coffee cup as she spoke. "Rachel lives in Seattle now. She's 32, has 2 beautiful children I barely know. Because I made the same mistake over and over, choosing work over moments I can never get back." Maya sat up straighter, her voice small but clear. "Did she ever forgive you?" "We're working on it. But some days, the distance feels as wide as ever." Margaret met Eli's eyes. "That's why watching you two together these past weeks has been both wonderful and painful. I see what I missed with Rachel, the little moments, the shared jokes, the pride in each other's achievements." Eli pulled Maya closer, feeling her lean into his side like she used to do when she was smaller. "I messed up last night," he admitted. "No, Dad," Maya protested weakly. "You had to work. It was important." "Not as important as you." Eli's voice was firm. "Never as important as you." Margaret set her cup down and leaned forward. "Maya, would you play something for me? Your father says you're incredibly talented." Maya hesitated, glancing at the upright piano against the wall, her mother's piano, kept in tune despite their tight budget. I messed up yesterday. I couldn't even play the first measure." "Sometimes our biggest failures lead to our proudest moments," Margaret said. "Did you know I once forgot my lines during a crucial board presentation? I was so mortified I almost quit. But instead, I prepared twice as hard for the next one, and that presentation landed me my first CEO position." Maya uncurled herself from the couch and walked to the piano. Her fingers ghosted over the keys without pressing them. "Dad usually sits with me when I practice." "He still can," Margaret said, standing up. "I should be going anyway." "But Maya?" She waited until the girl looked at her. "Thank you for letting me visit. Sometimes we need reminders of what really matters in life." Eli walked Margaret to the door while Maya began playing softly. Not her competition piece, but the lullaby Sarah used to sing, the one Eli still hummed while mopping floors. "I meant what I said about what matters," Margaret said at the door, her expression determined. "And I think I need to make some changes at Carter, Finch." With a final nod she turned and walked to her car, leaving Eli to wonder about the look in her eyes. He closed the door and returned to the living room, where Maya's playing had grown stronger, more confident. Sitting beside her on the piano bench, he felt the familiar warmth of her shoulder against his, and knew that whatever changes tomorrow might bring, this moment was exactly where he needed to be. Eli watched Maya pick at her breakfast, pushing scrambled eggs around her plate without taking a bite. The morning light caught the dried tear tracks on her cheeks, and his heart ached. He'd tried everything to cheer her up, making her favorite breakfast, telling silly jokes, even offering to let her skip school today. But the disappointment of last night hung heavy in the air, like a thick fog. The phone's sharp ring cut through the silence. Maya didn't even look up as Eli reached for it. "Hello? Eli?" Margaret's voice was warm but tentative. "I have something to drop off. Would it be all right if I stopped by in about 20 minutes? He glanced at Maya, then at the kitchen clock. "Of course, we're home." "Wonderful. And make sure Maya's there, too." Before he could ask why, Margaret had already hung up. Eli turned to his daughter. "That was Mrs. Finch. She's coming over with something." Maya shrugged, but he noticed her straighten slightly in her chair. Despite everything, Margaret had made quite an impression during her morning visit. While they waited, Eli tidied up the living room, gathering scattered sheet music and straightening the worn family photos on the walls. He caught himself nervously adjusting his collar in the hallway mirror, something he hadn't done since before his wife passed. The doorbell chimed exactly 20 minutes later. Margaret stood on the porch, holding a cream-colored envelope in her hands. Her business suit was impeccable as always, but her smile was softer than usual. "May I come in?" she asked, though she was already stepping through the door. "Maya? Are you here, dear?" Maya appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, her hands clasped in front of her. "Hi, Mrs. Finch." Margaret's eyes crinkled with warmth. "I have something for you." She held up the envelope. "One of our gala donors last night was quite impressed when I told them about a talented young pianist I knew. They happened to be on the board of the Regional Youth Music Foundation." Maya's eyes widened, and Eli felt his breath catch. "They were particularly moved when I mentioned how you've been playing your mother's favorite pieces," Margaret continued, her voice gentler now. "And well, here." She handed the envelope to Maya, who took it with trembling fingers. The paper crinkled as she carefully opened it, pulling out an official-looking letter with gold letterhead. "Dear Miss Maya Ward," she read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for a special consideration scholarship for the upcoming Regional Youth Piano Competition Series." Maya's voice broke. She looked up at Margaret, then at her father, tears welling in her eyes, but these were different from last night's tears. These sparkled with joy. "It's a full scholarship," Margaret explained, "covering entry fees for the next 3 competitions, plus weekly lessons with one of the Foundation's master teachers." She paused, watching Maya's face light up. "And they're willing to let you retry your qualification performance next weekend." "Really?" Maya's voice cracked with hope. Margaret nodded. "Really?" Maya launched herself forward, throwing her arms around Margaret's waist. The CEO stiffened for a moment, clearly unused to such displays of affection, but then her shoulders relaxed, and she wrapped her arms around the young girl. "Thank you," Maya whispered into Margaret's blazer. "Thank you so much." Eli stood watching, his own eyes growing misty. Margaret caught his gaze over Maya's head, and something unspoken passed between them. Understanding, gratitude, and perhaps something more. Maya pulled back suddenly, wiping her eyes. Dad, did you hear? I get another chance." She threw herself at him next, and he caught her in a tight hug, lifting her slightly off her feet like he used to when she was smaller. "I heard, sweetheart, I heard." When he set her down, Maya was practically bouncing with excitement. "Can I go call Mrs. Peterson, my piano teacher? She needs to know right away." "Of course." Eli laughed, and Maya darted off toward the phone in the kitchen, her footsteps light and quick, so different from the heavy trudging of last night. The living room felt warmer somehow, filled with the echo of Maya's joy. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching the dust motes in golden beams, and for the first time since the gala, Eli felt like he could breathe properly again. Margaret stood watching Maya through the kitchen doorway, a soft smile playing at her lips. "You know," she said quietly, "I think this might be the first time I've actually helped fix something instead of just running away from it." Eli turned to her, understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes it takes seeing someone else's story to understand your own better." She nodded, then reached into her purse and pulled out a small business card. "This is my personal number, in case Maya needs anything, or if you do." Their fingers brushed as he took the card, and neither pulled away immediately. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility. From the kitchen they could hear Maya's excited voice. "Mrs. Peterson, you'll never believe what happened." The evening sun painted long shadows across the empty community center parking lot as Eli's old pickup truck rattled to a stop. Maya looked out the passenger window, her fingers absently tapping against her thighs, a habit she'd developed when working through difficult piano passages in her head. "Dad?" she asked, uncertainty creeping into her voice. "Why are we here?" Eli turned off the engine and gave her a gentle smile. "Because, sweetheart, I want to hear you play. The piece you were going to perform at the competition." Maya's shoulders tensed. "But I messed up. I froze." "That was yesterday," Eli said softly, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "This is today. And today, it's just you and me." The community center's halls were quiet, their footsteps echoing against the worn linoleum floors. A few fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, but most of the building was dark. Eli led the way, his janitor's keys jingling as he found the right one for the performance room. The space wasn't fancy, just a modest stage with heavy burgundy curtains and about 100 folding chairs, usually used for local talent shows and community meetings. But in the center of the stage sat a gleaming, upright piano, its black surface catching the light from the single spotlight Eli switched on. Maya hesitated at the edge of the stage, her sheet music clutched to her chest. What if I mess up again? Eli climbed onto the stage and sat on the piano bench, patting the space beside him. Then you'll keep playing, just like your mom taught you. Remember what she used to say? A small smile tugged at Maya's lips. Wrong notes are just surprise visitors. Welcome them and keep going. That's right. Eli stood and moved to the single folding chair he'd placed in the front row. Now, Miss Maya Ward, whenever you're ready. Maya took a deep breath and settled onto the bench, adjusting its height with practiced ease. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment as she closed her eyes, centering herself just as her teacher had taught her. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the room. Eli watched as Maya's initial stiffness melted away, her body swaying slightly with the melody. This was the piece that had reminded her of her mother, the one she'd chosen for the competition because it felt like a conversation between them. As the music swelled, Eli noticed a tear rolling down Maya's cheek, but she was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since last night. Her fingers danced across the keys with confidence, drawing out both the delicate high notes and the rich, resonant bass lines. He remembered how Sarah, his late wife, used to sit in their tiny living room, teaching Maya the basics on their second-hand keyboard. Music isn't just about getting the notes right, she'd say. It's about letting your heart speak through your fingers. Maya's heart was speaking clearly now. The piece moved through its variations, each phrase flowing naturally into the next. When she reached the passage that had terrified her at the competition, she didn't hesitate. Her fingers found each note perfectly, building to a crescendo that filled the entire room with emotion. The final notes hung in the air like stars, slowly fading into a silence that felt almost sacred. Maya's hands remained on the keys for a moment, then dropped to her lap. More tears had fallen, but her smile was radiant. Eli stood up, clapping with genuine joy and pride. That was better than any gala, he said, his own eyes growing misty. Monday morning brought a crisp autumn breeze that rustled through the trees outside Carter, MAP Finch Enterprises. Eli was back in his janitor's uniform, methodically working his way through the lobby with his mop. The marble floors reflected the morning sunlight, and the familiar rhythm of his work gave him time to think. The past week had been a whirlwind of emotions, from the triumph of the gala to the heartache of missing Maya's performance, and then the unexpected blessing of the scholarship. His thoughts were interrupted by the sharp click of heels against marble. Margaret Finch approached, her usual professional demeanor softened by what looked like anticipation. She was carrying 2 paper cups from the corner coffee shop. "Good morning, Eli," she said, holding out one of the cups. "Do you have a moment?" He propped his mop against the wall and accepted the coffee with a grateful nod. "Of course, Miss Finch." "Margaret, please," she corrected gently. "Would you mind joining me in my office? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." Eli followed her to the executive floor, feeling slightly out of place in his work clothes among the pristine surroundings. Margaret's office was a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city. She gestured for him to take a seat in one of the comfortable chairs, facing her desk. "How's Maya doing?" she asked, settling into her own chair. "Better," Eli replied, warming his hands around the coffee cup. "The scholarship. It meant more than you know. She's already talking about next year's competition." Margaret smiled, but there was something else in her expression, a mix of determination and what looked like nervous energy. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since the gala, Eli. About food, about community, about second chances." She paused, arranging some papers on her desk. "And about my own daughter." Eli waited patiently as she gathered her thoughts. "The company owns that empty storefront on Mason Street," she continued. "The one next to the community center where Maya practices. I've been working on a proposal for the board, one they approved this morning." She slid a folder across the desk toward him. Eli set down his coffee and opened it, finding architectural renderings of what looked like a cafe space. "We're calling it the Common Ground Cafe," Margaret explained, her voice growing animated. "It will be a training facility and restaurant, specifically designed to give opportunities to people who need a second chance or a fresh start. Single parents, people transitioning careers, those who just need someone to believe in them." Eli looked up from the drawings, meeting her eager gaze. "The gala proved something to everyone, Eli. You have talent, yes, but more than that, you have heart. The way you worked with the kitchen staff, how you handled the pressure, your attention to detail." She leaned forward slightly. "I want you to help me run it." Eli blinked, trying to process her words. "Run it?" "As our head chef and program coordinator," she clarified. "You'd help develop the training program, mentor the staff, and oversee the kitchen. The hours would be flexible. We'd work around Maya's schedule. No more missing important moments." Eli's throat felt tight as he thought of his daughter. I don't have formal training," he admitted. Margaret shook her head. "What you have is more valuable. Real-world experience, patience, and an understanding of what our trainees might be going through. Besides," she added with a small smile, "after that gala dinner, half the board members' wives have been asking for your recipes." Eli looked back at the renderings, noticing details he'd missed before. The warm colors, the community table in the center, the teaching kitchen visible from the dining room. It wasn't just a restaurant. It was a place of possibility. "The salary would be significantly more than your current position," Margaret continued, her tone gentler now. "And there's potential for growth as we expand the program to other locations." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "When my brother died, he was just starting to realize his dream of opening his own restaurant. He wanted to create a place that would bring people together, where food could change lives." She turned back to face Eli. "I see that same spirit in you." Eli stood as well, his mind racing with possibilities. He thought of Maya's face when she played piano, how she lit up when they cooked together. He thought of his late wife, and how proud she would be to see their recipes helping others. "Would I?" he started, then cleared his throat. "Would I still be able to attend Maya's practices?" "Of course," Margaret assured him. "The cafe would be right next door to the community center. You could even hear her playing during the afternoon lull," she added with a knowing smile. She moved closer, extending her hand. "What do you say, Eli? Will you help me make this dream a reality?" Eli looked at her offered hand, then back at her face. In her eyes, he saw not just a business proposition, but understanding, respect, and something warmer that made his heart beat a little faster. He reached out and took her hand. Their handshake was firm, professional, but the look they shared spoke volumes, of shared losses and new beginnings, of trust and possibilities yet to unfold. For a moment, neither of them seemed able to look away or let go. The community cafe buzzed with late-afternoon energy. Warm light streamed through the tall windows, catching the steam rising from coffee cups and casting a golden glow on the exposed brick walls. The smell of fresh-baked cookies and brewing coffee filled the cozy space. Eli stood behind the gleaming counter in his crisp white chef's coat, a far cry from his old janitor's uniform. He kneaded dough for tomorrow's breakfast pastries, his movements confident and practiced. The kitchen was his sanctuary now, complete with well-organized shelves and state-of-the-art equipment that still made him shake his head in disbelief sometimes. "Order up," he called out, sliding a plate of warm apple turnovers onto the counter. "Table 6. Maya, wearing a neat blue apron over her school clothes, grabbed the plate with practiced ease. Her piano competition medal hung proudly around her neck. She'd started wearing it to work as a good luck charm. "Got it, Dad?" She weaved between the tables, delivering the pastries with a bright smile that reminded Eli so much of her mother. The cafe had become their shared space, a place where they could spend time together even on busy days. Maya did her homework at the corner table between helping customers, and Eli could hear her humming snippets of her piano pieces as she worked. "These smell amazing," an elderly regular customer said as Maya set down his order. "Just like my grandmother used to make." That's because Dad uses real butter and vanilla beans, Maya explained proudly. No shortcuts. Eli smiled as he heard her, remembering how his wife had taught him the same lesson years ago in their tiny kitchen at home. The memory was warm now, not painful like it used to be. The afternoon crowd thinned out, leaving just a few customers lingering over their coffee. Eli watched through the kitchen window as Maya restocked the display case, carefully arranging cookies and muffins just so. She'd developed an eye for presentation that impressed even the professional bakers on staff. "Hey, Dad," Maya called out, "we're running low on those cinnamon rolls everyone loves." "Already ahead of you, sweetie." Eli gestured to the rack of cooling pastries behind him. "They'll be ready in about 10 minutes. The kitchen staff moved around him with easy familiarity. Gone were the days of cold shoulders and skeptical looks. Now they traded recipes and techniques, each bringing their own experience to the table. Tony, who had once been so resistant, had become one of Eli's strongest supporters, especially after Eli helped his nephew get a job as a prep cook. Mr. Ward called Sarah, one of the young baristas they'd hired from the local community college. "Could you show me how to make that raspberry sauce again, the one for the cheesecake?" "Of course." Eli wiped his hands on his apron. "Maya, can you watch the front for a minute?" "No problem." Maya slipped behind the counter, straightening her apron with professional pride. As Eli demonstrated the sauce technique to Sarah, he caught glimpses of Maya greeting customers with genuine warmth. She'd blossomed here, finding her own confidence in this space between music and hospitality. The cafe had become more than just a workplace. It was a second home where both father and daughter could grow. The bell above the door chimed, and Eli looked up to see Margaret Finch enter. But this time, she wasn't alone. A young woman who shared Margaret's elegant features followed her inside, looking around the cafe with curious eyes. Maya's face lit up. "Ms. Finch!" She hurried around the counter to greet them. Eli quickly finished his demonstration and stepped out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a clean towel. The sight of Margaret still made his heart skip a beat, though he'd grown better at hiding it over the past few weeks. Margaret wore one of her signature power suits, but her smile was soft and genuine, the real Margaret that few people got to see. "Eli," she said warmly, then gestured to the young woman beside her. "I'd like you to meet my daughter, Claire. She's visiting from Seattle." Claire stepped forward, offering her hand. She had her mother's determined chin but softer eyes. "Mom's told me so much about this place," she said, "and about the amazing chef who runs it." Eli felt his cheeks warm as he shook her hand. "Your mother's the one who made it all possible." "Please," Margaret waved off the comment, but her eyes sparkled. "You're the heart of this place, Eli. We just provided the walls." Maya appeared at Eli's side, practically bouncing with excitement. "Would you like to try today's special? Dad made his famous apple turnovers." "That sounds perfect," Claire said, sharing a meaningful look with her mother. Mom mentioned they remind her of Uncle James's recipe. A comfortable silence fell between them all, understanding, gratitude, and something more passing unspoken through the afternoon light. In this moment, surrounded by the warmth of fresh-baked goods and newfound family, Eli felt the rightness of everything that had led them here. "Let me get those turnovers," Maya said, already heading for the display case. "And maybe you'd like to hear about the music program at my school? Ms. Finch helped set up a new scholarship fund." Eli watched as his daughter led Margaret and Claire to a cozy corner table, her hands moving animatedly as she talked. The sight of them together, Margaret's proud smile, Claire's genuine interest, and Maya's bright enthusiasm, filled his heart in a way he hadn't expected. The community cafe had transformed for the evening. Small tea lights twinkled in mason jars on each table, and vases of wildflowers added splashes of color throughout the room. The usual cafe tables had been pushed together to create one long family-style setting, draped with crisp white tablecloths that Margaret had insisted on providing. Eli moved with practiced ease in the kitchen, checking the braised short ribs that had been simmering for hours. The rich aroma of beef, red wine, and herbs filled the air, exactly as it had that night at the corporate gala that changed everything. He smiled, remembering how nervous he'd been then. Now, the kitchen felt like home. The piano notes drifted through the cafe as Maya played a gentle melody in the corner. Her fingers danced across the keys of the upright piano, a gift from Margaret that had appeared mysteriously one morning, complete with a red bow. The music added a warm backdrop to the cheerful conversation filling the room. Tony, the former head cook who had once given Eli the cold shoulder, now sat at the table sharing kitchen stories with other staff members. "Remember when Eli taught us his secret for getting perfectly crispy potatoes?" he said, laughing. "Changed my whole approach to breakfast service." Mrs. Donnelly from the farmer's market was there too, her eyes crinkling with joy as she watched Eli work. She still supplied the cafe with fresh herbs, and she never failed to mention how proud his wife would have been. The kitchen staff had become like family over the past few weeks. Jenny, the young pastry apprentice, helped Eli plate the dishes, her hands steady now after his patient teaching. Carlos, their newest hire who reminded Eli of himself not so long ago, carefully arranged the garnishes with growing confidence. "Need any help, chef?" Jenny asked, using his new title with a grin. Eli shook his head, smiling. "Just about ready. But maybe grab those dinner rolls from the oven? They should be done." The warmth in the room wasn't just from the ovens. It came from the people, the regular customers who'd become friends, the staff who'd become family, and the genuine connections that grew stronger each day. Margaret sat near Maya's piano, her face soft as she watched the young girl play. She'd been spending more time at the cafe lately, often bringing paperwork just to sit and enjoy the atmosphere. Her daughter Jessica had flown in for the dinner too, their relationship healing slowly over shared meals and long conversations. Maya finished her piece and joined the group, her cheeks flushed with pleasure as everyone applauded. She hugged her father quickly as she passed the kitchen. "Smells just like Mom's recipe, Dad." Eli's heart swelled. He'd kept Sarah's recipe box in the cafe kitchen, a reminder of where this journey began. Sometimes, when he opened it, he could almost hear her laugh, could almost see her standing beside him nodding approval. The short ribs were perfect, tender enough to fall off the bone, swimming in a rich sauce that people were already soaking up with pieces of fresh bread. Eli watched as plates were passed around the table, as people took their first bites and closed their eyes in appreciation. Margaret stood, holding up her glass. The room quieted naturally, all eyes turning to her. Her usual corporate polish had softened in the casual setting, and genuine warmth filled her voice as she spoke. "When I first met Eli, he was cleaning our corporate offices with the same care and attention to detail that he now brings to every dish that leaves this kitchen. But what makes this cafe special isn't just the excellent food, it's the heart behind it." She paused, looking around the room. "Eli has become the soul of this place. He's created more than a cafe, he's created a community." The room hummed with murmurs of agreement and affection. Maya beamed at her father, her pride evident. The kitchen staff nodded, knowing firsthand how Eli's quiet strength and genuine care had changed their workplace for the better. Eli felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the kitchen heat. He looked around at these people who had become so important to him. His daughter, finding her own path through music. Margaret, whose trust had opened new doors. The staff who had welcomed him into their world. And the regular customers who made every day worthwhile. The same recipe that had started everything still had the power to bring people together, to create moments of connection and joy. The short ribs might have been what got him noticed, but it was his heart that had built this place into something special. The night air wrapped around Eli and Maya like a gentle blanket as they stepped out of the cafe. Stars twinkled overhead, bright and clear, against the dark sky. Maya clutched a paper bag containing leftover chocolate cake, while Eli balanced 2 containers of short ribs and roasted vegetables. "That was the best dinner ever, Dad," Maya said, her cheeks still flushed from playing piano all evening. She skipped a few steps ahead, then fell back in line with her father's steady pace. "Better than my famous scrambled eggs?" Eli teased, remembering their conversation from what felt like a lifetime ago. Maya laughed, the sound echoing off the quiet buildings. "Way better. But don't worry, I still love your eggs too." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment, their footsteps in sync on the sidewalk. The spring evening was cool but not cold, perfect for their short walk home. "You know what I loved most?" Maya asked, looking up at her father, watching everyone's faces while they ate. Mrs. Donnelly from the farmer's market kept closing her eyes with every bite, like she was having a religious experience. Eli chuckled. "She did supply those amazing fresh herbs. I think she felt personally invested in how it turned out." "And Margaret's daughter," Maya continued, excitement bubbling in her voice. "She asked if I could teach her some piano basics. Can you believe it? She's in college." "I can believe it," Eli said softly. "You played beautifully tonight, sweetheart. Your mom would have been so proud." Instead of the usual sadness that came with mentioning her mother, Maya's smile grew wider. "I felt her there tonight, Dad. Like she was standing right behind me while I played. And when you were cooking, it smelled just like when she used to make those ribs." Eli's throat tightened with emotion, but it wasn't the crushing grief he'd carried for so long. It was something lighter, sweeter, like remembering a favorite song. "Speaking of cooking," Maya said, switching topics with the easy grace of youth, "when are you going to teach that cooking class Margaret suggested? The one for kids after school?" "Probably next month," Eli replied. "We need to get the cafe running smoothly first, but Tony's already volunteered to help with the classes." Maya giggled. "Remember when he wouldn't even look at you? Now he acts like you're best friends." "People can surprise you," Eli said, shifting the containers to his other hand. "Sometimes they just need a chance to show their better side." They turned onto their street, where the old maple trees created a canopy overhead. Maya's piano scholarship certificate hung proudly in their front window, catching the moonlight. "Dad?" Maya's voice had grown serious. "Are you happy with everything that's happened?" Eli stopped walking and looked at his daughter. Her eyes, so like her mother's, watched him intently. "I am," he said, and meant it. "The cafe is everything I never knew I wanted. I get to cook, to help people, to be there for your practices and recitals. And having Margaret and her daughter join us tonight, it felt right, didn't it?" Maya nodded enthusiastically. Like they belonged there. Margaret even knew all the words to that old song we were singing. They reached their front porch, where Maya's bike leaned against the railing and Eli's gardening tools sat neatly in their box. Simple things that made their house a home. "You know what else?" Maya said as Eli unlocked the door. "I think we're going to be okay. Better than okay." Eli set the containers down on the kitchen counter and pulled his daughter into a one-armed hug. "We already are, sweetheart." Maya yawned and headed toward her room, the paper bag of cake swinging from her hand. "Save some ribs for breakfast." Alone in the kitchen, Eli opened the wooden recipe box that had started everything. His wife's handwriting filled dozens of cards, each one a memory of shared meals and laughter. He pulled out a blank card and picked up a pen. With careful strokes, he wrote, "Some meals feed the body, others feed the soul. Tonight, we had both. What would you do if you were in their place?" Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you thought this was just the beginning, you're right. Click through and see where the story takes you next. If you enjoyed the story of Eli Ward, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.